costing. However, I decided to also briefly discuss process costing, activity-based costing, and then it kind of became a comparison of the three and which one I would prefer and which one I recommend. So starting with job order costing absorbs all direct material costs, all direct costs that can be tracked easily to that job. They get allocated to that job and to the units produced during that job. But then you also have the item of overhead, manufacturing overhead, which is typically allocated using some sort of a base rate. It's also typically based on labor hours. However, lately, and I guess not necessarily lately, but it's been under criticism because of just a single rate that's not necessarily an accurate rate at which cost is applied or accrued during that job, essentially, or the cost driver is not equal to what it's being allocated at. And so with the overhead, you have the overhead that just kind of gets accumulated in these cost pools until a job is completed or jobs are completed, at which point they have this rate at which they'll apply these different overhead accounts to the job in order to have the total job order costing. This is great for very specific manufacturing processes, or if you're manufacturing a specific and different item that's unique, then you will want and almost need to use job order costing in order to make accurate decisions based on the costs associated with each unique product. However, on the flip side of that, you have process costing, which is great for continuous production. So an example of that is steel production. Steel is going to be constantly being made. It's a homogeneous product. It's very similar processes, and so each period during this continual production, each period you have all the costs associated during that period. So you have all the direct materials that were added, all your conversion costs, and then you will apply those costs to the equivalent units produced in process costing. The caveat with process costing and what can make it difficult is dealing with goods that are transferred from one division to the next, and that's why we use equivalent units which were finished, equivalent units. That way, it's all costs are appropriately absorbed into each unit that is finished, that's transferred out, that is still in a WIP account, basically. And so process costing just takes all those costs associated with that period and allocates them to the equivalent units in that period. The last one that I had researched and that I'm going to touch base on is activity-based costing, which in my opinion is almost a mix between the two. It may be hard or not necessarily more efficient to use in situations with process costing where you have the same process going on, you're continually producing the same product. However, with activity-based costing, costs are first tracked to whatever activity brings up costs. So if using a machine for production, using that machine is going to incur costs of maintenance, it's going to incur costs of utilities, electricity, and things. So all costs are tracked to a cost activity. Then those costs are tracked to cost objects. So with activity-based costing, you get more of a real picture of what a product actually costs to produce, because that object is only getting costs that are associated. It's only getting costs that it incurred to be produced. So if it takes an hour of welding, it's not going to have just a pool of welding hours and costs that get allocated to it. It's going to have just the cost of an hour worth of welding on that object. And so with activity-based costing, you were able to realize more appropriately what costs for products are. The reason why I prefer activity-based costing and from my research is for management and decision-making purposes. If through allocating, excuse me, after allocating overhead, you may have, for job order costing, you may have a job that looks like it's very profitable or has good margin on it, but that may be based upon just that specific circumstance, whether you were producing something at the same time and the way that overhead got allocated to the two jobs, it was more heavy on the other. With activity-based costing, it's more of an accurate cost to that item, in which gives management the opportunity to make decisions based upon whether to keep producing that item, whether there needs to be costs that need to be changed, whether they need to charge a higher price for that particular object. With activity-based costing, you have that information that's more readily available, it's more accurate, which impacts managers' ability to make decisions and to really help that business to achieve their objectives and their strategy and their long-term goals. So this is why I prefer activity-based costing over job order or process costing.